What is going on, Panther Lair? We are back talking about the Pittsburgh Panthers home overtime victory over the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, 80-76 this past Tuesday night. Now, after Pitt's recent game against the NC State Wolfpack, I called out that they weren't doing a good job in ball screen defense, really weren't holding up well at the point of attack. Obviously, I'm shining spotlight on something that didn't go very well. So anytime something does go well, I want to be fair, want to put the spotlight on that. So I did think they did a much better job with those things against Wake Forest. It's one of the reasons they were able to win in overtime. And I'm going to break down kind of some sequences over a period of time. And I've done that before, but sometimes I'll break down the whole game or sequences kind of like throughout the whole game. This is kind of a very condensed period of time. It's in the second half here. And to set the stage, Juke Harris, he hits a three. Amari Witherspoon ends up making a layup, and that's how we get to 46-43. But what ends up happening is Pitt goes on a 11-4 run in this span here. And when you really think about that, the Demon Deacons shot 46% in this game, and the Panthers shot 38%. So clearly, when they're going on a run, that's pretty grindy for them offensively, but it also means they're having to get stops. And so I thought that this juncture here was pretty important because, Pitt's trailing, and at the end of this, they ultimately come out, up 52-50. Not going to show the free throws necessarily at the end of this, but just kind of showing the defensive possessions. Want to jump in, but wanted to set the stage here. So one of the things I thought was interesting is there's a baseline out of bounds, there's like a sideline out of bounds. There's a couple of those situations in these sequences, which, hey, Pitt has not always been very good defending in those situations. I called that out in the very last clip against NC State, right? And it's Amari Witherspoon who gets caught on a screen there and ends up giving up a layup. So it's interesting. We come right back to a baseline out of bounds. Much better job navigating the screens. Now, he does get screened here a little bit, but fights through with some urgency. And, this is going to be a right-handed player here, so he's going to be able to probably contest this shot given the amount of trailing that he was doing in this particular instance. So he's right here. So if this just ends up being a shot, he's going to maybe even block this, contest this. Instead, Juke Harris commits a turnover here, a very clear hook right in front of this referee there, and forces a turnover. So here we go. This is going to be zoom alignment, zoom action. We've seen a lot of this. I think the Panthers did a much better job communicating switches or just understanding when they were going to switch. They didn't have to be overtly loud about it, but much smoother job here than against the Wolfpack. So you see Witherspoon is trailing, but what he ends up doing is just take the DHO guy. Cam Corrin switches onto the ball handler who used both of the zoom screens. And, Corrin can be effective in this situation. If he understands how to apply his length, if he keeps his feet active, he can adequately contest with his, 6'11 frame and wingspan against smaller players if they're going to settle for jumpers. And so I thought he did a pretty good job of that. Really like the activity as the low man here from Brandon Cummings. Not necessarily one of the team's better defenders. In fact, I would argue he's potentially, one of their most inconsistent, but his energy level, in and out, in and out, in and out. And then he also makes a really, just plays with a lot of urgency here to close back out on what ultimately will be kind of like this post up, goes to the middle of the paint. Everyone's staying on their assignment. Here Cummings is caught. So he has to fight to get back through here, almost deflects this pass, and makes a good contest. Nothing fancy, but very urgent. Go, another possession later. Here we see again the zoom screens. Now Cummings is trailing, but if we back this up a little bit, again, these guys, he didn't really get screened. He just happens to trail a little bit here. Not the end of the world. We've seen Cummings in much worse defensive position coming out of this, but Roman Cialepa, he steps up, and he just pretty much says, hey, you know what? I'm just going to wall off any downhill penetration. Doesn't necessarily go with the roll guy, but it works out here because Corrin sinks just enough to take away like an immediate short roll situation. The two guys at the ball kind of force this kick out, but because he just sinks a little bit, and Witherspoon is in a very good tag position, Corrin is able to get back out. And again, if he applies his length, this is a reasonable contest. This isn't the worst look, don't get me wrong, but it's not an uncontested shot. And Cialepa does a good job in handling rebounds. So here we go, sideline out of bounds instance. Now we're going to watch this. Now here, I really like what Barry Dunning Jr. was doing throughout the game, applying length, knowing when to sag off, kind of flashing, stunting, just doing a good job here. Switches And then we see him get caught up there, but at the same time, good communication enough with Corin that he openly contests. Again, and then Makari Moore effort there to save the ball. This is the baseline out of bounds right after that. Here we're going to see another thing I really like here from Dunning Jr. So Witherspoon trying to navigate the screen, and Dunning Jr. just kicks over just enough and flashes just enough and applies his length just enough to not allow like a real tight curl here to maybe get a paint touch. Said really good closeout here by Witherspoon. Nice, like choppy steps, very disciplined. He's balanced here. And because of that, he is able to immediately go stride for stride. Witherspoon's got good size at the college level at a guard position, stands him straight up, forces a terrible shot. So this is the kind of defense that the Panthers have to play consistently in order for them to have opportunities in games, because their offense is not going to be usually very efficient, but they are going to probably continue to get a decent amount of offensive rebounds, right? So Lepa's really emerged in that way. Dunning Jr. helps on the board. The guards rebound okay. Plus they take so many threes. There's a lot of long rebounds for the guards to gobble up. So can this be the blueprint every time? Not necessarily, but the defense can be. And it just looks like this really came down to greater sense of urgency, a greater sense of being in the details, and being, communicating or at least knowing the game plan well enough that you are executing it in order for them to put themselves in this position. So if they can continue to do this, because I think they probably have the Notre Dame and Florida State games are the ones that are sticking out that they, certainly could win those games. They may be able to get another one here and there if they're able to play this level of defense consistently, particularly on the road.